Tony Khan lied to the people. He said back in July of 2025 that all-in attendance was close to 30,000 people. I picked this up right off Fightful. I looked it up right after I read the WrestleNomics article stating that AEW All in Texas did not do anywhere near 30,000 people. Nowhere near, not even close. He said close to 30,000 people. You can look it up. October the 8th, WrestleNomics decided to bust the bubble of AEW. But more importantly, they actually revealed also that they tried to muzzle the state of Texas to not reveal this sort of information. So let's get this on the record first. Again, back in July, shortly after the event, Tony Khan said that AEW All in Texas did close to 30,000 in attendance. Now, when you read the WrestleNomics article, which I'm going to summarize, I'm going to summarize this part. We're actually going to read the later part. That the governor's office actually promised AEW $1 million in funding to cover their expenses, but that was under the belief that AEW would do 33,490 fans. Well, attendance, 33,000 in attendance, with 32,500 paid fans. So that was the barrier, the estimate that AEW gave to the state of Texas back in February, which was 4 months before the event. The actual attendance was 23,759, with 21,973 being the number of people scanned into the venue. So when they scan your ticket, 21,973 paid fans. Nowhere near 30,000 people. Now, because they fell below their estimate by 29%, the government cut their assistance by 29%. Look, let's talk about this. I've been saying to people, wrestling shows, they always overshoot in terms of how many people are in the building. It's just a wrestling thing. It's kind of a sports thing in general. Attendance means everybody there. Fans, the people who actually paid, is almost always lower. But the real issue here is that Tony Khan was allowed to go out and make these kinds of comments, and people just take it at face value. It's the same damn thing we got here with these pay-per-view buys. Every time they pop up and they say, oh, they did about 150,000 pay-per-view buys. Nobody checks that information. Nobody says that's true or it's not true. People just kind of go on with it. And that's not right. That's not how we do things. What happened to actually doing journalism? This is where I give WrestleNomics some credit. They heard Tony Khan say, oh, it was almost 30,000 people or whatever. But they went and checked because they can. In the state of Texas, they have to give it to you, which we're about to find out in a second. But people should do that with the pay-per-view. Can we find out what the real pay-per-view buys are? I'm sure we can't because there's so many different providers. But we need to be able to find that out too. Are they really selling 150, 170,000 pay-per-view buys at $50 a pop? Because I'm starting to question that. But here's the part that really kind of caught my attention. It says, quote, one of the drafts of the contract shows suggested changes from a member of AEW's legal team that highlights the company's efforts to control information. AEW sought to insert provisions that would have committed the city to keep secret any attendance information and help AEW make trade secret claims if there was a legal requirement to publicly reveal the numbers. The suggested confidentiality clause would have the city agree to not publish or disclose attendance figures, turnstile counts, drop counts, ticket numbers, revenues, or box office receipts, or similar information, except when disclosure would be legally unavoidable. Even then, AEW's language would have bound the city to notify the company in advance and assist in claiming that AEW's attendance was secret under state law. They tried to get the state of Texas to sign an NDA. How insecure do you have to be? Now look, it's basic business. I understand. If you're in business, you don't want everybody. This is a talking point. And this was in the contract before they knew they were going to fall so far short of expectations, by the way. Like, you don't put this in the contract afterwards. It was clearly there before, which means that their estimates was probably way off and they knew it. That's the real. That the estimates probably were way off and they knew it. They was able to get the state to believe it. But they figured once this information would come out, it would make them look bad. And it did. Because doing 21,000 fans is not the worst thing in the world. It's a huge venue. And doing 21,000 is nowhere near filling that venue. But it's a damn sight better than most other people could do. And that's the one thing about AEW that just baffles me. They do so well, but they don't do WWE figures. They don't do WrestleMania numbers. And people look at that like it's a failure. It's not. They're the second most profitable wrestling company probably to ever exist. They have a large fan base. These are things to be proud of. These are not things that you should be trying to cover up. It's sad and pathetic that you will be trying to cover these things up. So what? You did. You thought you were going to get 33,000 people. That's what you thought. You got 21,000. I'm sorry, you thought you were going to get 32,000 paid fans. You got 21,000. Yeah, you were off, but that's still not bad. Do you think TNA would scoff at doing 21,000 fans? Do you think MLW would scoff at doing 21,000 fans? Hell, a basketball team wouldn't scoff at doing 21,000 fans. The NFL wouldn't scoff at 21,000 fans. That's a good number of people in the building. The fact that they thought so little of themselves that they would try to cover this thing up, and then Tony Khan would lie to the public about it, is what makes it pathetic. That's what makes it sad. The fact that you knew that you were going to fall below that 32,000, and you tried to get the state to go along with it, it's pathetic. They also had other clauses that they wanted in these contracts. It says, quote, another suggested clause would have sent legal disputes, if there were any, between AEW and the city into private binding arbitration instead of a public court. Like with at least some of the talent contracts, AEW wanted its counterparty to waive its right to a jury trial and handle litigation only in private with AEW's chosen arbitrator, Jams. Those clauses didn't make it into the final version. Agreeing to it wouldn't have complied with state law. So it's illegal under state law to bind the state to arbitration and to prevent the state from putting out information such as turnstile counts, drop counts, revenues, etc. Because you're dealing with public money. So yeah, it should be illegal. It shouldn't be dark slush funds for fucking wrestling companies anyway. The big problem here is that we kept hearing that AEW was coming to challenge WrestleMania in their attendance figures, and they were nowhere near. Which is not a surprise at all. Again, anybody with a lick of realism in their fandom would have known AEW was not going to get land anywhere near WrestleMania. But the people who had watched the show enjoyed it. That's the important part. I want AEW and their fans to actually just be realistic, man. You know, it keeps happening that these guys pump up these shows and then they hope nobody cares when the real numbers come out. I don't really care about this stuff. Like the attendance and the TV ratings. These things don't add to my enjoyment of the show. A small, energetic crowd is just fine, but good creative and good characters are the most important parts of a wrestling show, not the size of the venue. In fact, the bigger the venue, the harder it is to get fan energy anyway. But instead of playing in the rivers and the lakes that you used to, you got to go chasing waterfalls. And AEW fans need to chill with this stuff. Just stop it. Tony Khan is delusional. I want an audit of every single pay-per-view buy. I want an audit of their pay-per-view buys. And if it was possible to audit all of their ticket sales, I would audit of those too. They were small venues, like in Chicago and in Philadelphia, where I know they didn't sell out. 600 people, I know it wasn't sold out. I could look at it from the TV and could tell it wasn't sold out. But hey, it's the best it's ever been. It's the greatest year they've ever had. What more can you say? AEW could be a fabulously successful pro wrestling company if they were honest and realistic. This desire to pump themselves up next to WWE only makes them look more pathetic when the real numbers come out. But it also shows that Tony Khan has been operating inside of a bubble where he can control the flow of information. And that seems to be where he's most comfortable. He doesn't step outside of his bubble and be challenged on any of these things. Even Meltzer, he just reports whatever Tony Khan told him. And we're supposed to just believe it. When it's WWE, we challenge it. If it's TNA, we laugh at it and we challenge it. When Santino came out and said that, TNA could quite possibly be the number 2 wrestling company, everybody laughed out loud because they're like, it's absurd. They told the truth. It's absurd for TNA to think that they could be the number 2 wrestling company. They don't have that kind of money. They don't have that kind of roster. They don't operate out of the same buildings. There's all these things that they just don't do on the same level as AEW. But when it comes to AEW, people will constantly have you believe that AEW is on the same level or superior to WWE. Well, it was just not too long ago. What was this? Was it All Out? Meltzer was talking about how much better All Out was than WrestlePalooza, even though nobody remembers what happened at All Out. And he just lavishes stars upon their pay-per-view events. I mean, he's giving them 4-star pre-show matches. It's absurd. That marketing gimmick is not working. Operating in the bubble of the IWC is not working. You need some real feedback, Tony Khan. You should have, when CM Punk went on Ariel Helwani and said you're not running a real business, your response should have been to either accept that criticism and change course, or come out publicly and say it's not true. But what we've seen and what everybody who has eyeballs are starting to notice is that you're running this company pretty much into the ground, and it's a tax write-off, and a gift from your dad is a tax write-off. It doesn't mean anything. So now people don't take you seriously. You don't do any challenging interviews where people can question any of this information. And look, you're a private company. I get it. But looking at the state of this thing, just at the lies and the potential lies and all the other stuff that you can get away with, this is bullshit, man. It really is. I don't mind AEW. I'm not upset that it exists. But we need to keep it together. This is TNA on steroids. That's what AEW is. It doesn't feel like WCW did when it was in its prime. Now, there was a unique feel to AEW about 4 years ago, but not today. Today, this feels like a company on its last legs. And I know it's not, because they have all this money. A company on its last legs doesn't do 20,000 people in a building. But that same company not being able to fill a building of 1,500 just a couple of weeks later is absolutely absurd. How is this the same company? I don't know. But trying to run an NDA on the city is a pretty ballsy move. I got to give you credit for that. And I'm glad it didn't work. Because the more daylight gets shined on this infection, the better off everybody will be. The better off Tony Khan will be. He will be forced to deal with the reality that his company is not as successful as he wants it to be. that his critics might be right, and either he needs to give up some power or he needs to take this thing more seriously. I think Vince Russo had a really good criticism of Tony Khan a couple of days ago, where he said, "You're doing this as a part-time job. You can't do that. That's real. You can't do this part-time. You can't be running the Jags and running the soccer team and running the wrestling company. You get out what you put in. If you're half-assing it, then you're going to get half-ass out of it." My point is, it's not just Tony Khan half-assing it. It's not just Dave Meltzer running with whatever Tony Khan tells him. It's also the inaccuracy of the information that we get. I mean, this is my final thing. I'm going to close on this. WrestleTix, who has been keeping track of ticket sales for these shows, it just occurred to me to go back and look. The day of All In Texas, July 12th, 2025, they tweeted out that AEW had distributed 25,671 tickets, which was most of the tickets available for the show. They had set up the venue for 27,000. There was an actual attendance, which includes the concession stands and all the workers, 23,759. So that means they put out 4,000 more comps than they actually used. That's insane. I'm sure it's just an estimate. They can't give us that information, dead on the nose. But my God, people are following this WrestleTix account. I use this WrestleTix account to suggest what attendance will be for these shows. And look at how far off they were. They were off by 4,000. This is unreal. There needs to be greater transparency in the wrestling business for people who really want to follow it. But I'm only half interested in this kind of stuff. I'm interested in the patterns more than the week-to-week stuff, long-term patterns. And AEW's been on the downslide for 2 or 3 years now. The bubble's got to burst at some point, and people are going to have to recognize, no matter how many wrestlers leave and talk about the place, no matter how many podcasters mention the business, no matter how many old timers who used to work there talk about it, it's all just rolls off of a duck's back, and AEW's fans just plug their fingers in their ears and keep on going. I mean, enough's enough. We got to start asking some real questions here. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.